him back in the next day. Uriah, why didn't you go home? He says, my master, how can I go and sleep in the comfort of my wife's arms and enjoy the comforts of my home while my comrades sleep out under the stars with danger all around them? I cannot do it. So until I return to my comrades to continue the fight, I shall sleep under the stars as they here at the door of your palace. So David said, well, let me try this again. So he invited him in for a big feast, and then he got him drunk. He said, surely he'll forget his comrades now. And so he got him drunk, and Uriah stumbled out of the presence of the king and fell at the door of the palace and slept there all night long. And yet again the messengers came and told him that he was not at home again. And so David then turned very, very dark. And he said, okay, all right, then I've got to fix this. So he sends Uriah back to the battlefront, bearing new orders for the general. The orders were for the general to put Uriah in the heat of the battle, at the fiercest point, and then to withdraw the support troops and let him be killed. And that's what happened. So he killed Uriah and brought Bathsheba into his home and added her to his harem. So often the cover-up just makes things worse. Now, I'm not meaning to suggest that women are not capable of this kind of behavior, but overwhelmingly it is powerful men, or at least men who want to feel powerful, who behave in this manner. We don't need to search far for examples. Bill Clinton, John Edwards, John Ensign, Mark Sanford, oh my God, John and Kate plus 8. But most tragically, in this recent spate, Steve McNair, who was shot and killed in the course of his infidelity. Estimates range, but it's suggested that 60% of marriages will experience infidelity. Half of all marriages end in divorce. And some say that 90% of those 50% are because of infidelity. Why is it so hard for men to behave? I don't have an answer. I'm just asking the question. I included the reading from 1 Corinthians to illustrate how Paul and the early church, and ultimately Western culture, view marriage in relationship to sex. Paul writes, "To the unmarried and widows, I say that it is well for them to remain unmarried. But if they are not practicing self-control, they should marry. For it is better to marry than to be aflame with passion." Now, there are at least two things wrong with that passage. The first thing is, why is it that to marry is the opposite of being aflame with passion? But even more relevant is, if you are not practicing self-control, why in the world should you marry? But this is his advice. If you're not practicing self-control, get married. Why would you marry someone who's out of control? But this whole difficulty and discomfort in our relationship with our human sexuality betrays an even deeper flaw. Is marriage primarily a mechanism for harnessing and controlling the sexual energy of human beings? If that's the purpose of marriage, then it's a very poor machine. I think that because our culture views marriage in exactly this way, even when it's not explicitly stated, because we come from a history of viewing marriage this way, even as we continue to evolve our understanding in the institution of marriage, we cannot, therefore, easily imagine marriage on another basis. Ironically, the marriage equality movement has actually provoked us to rethink marriage in a way that brings benefits to all married couples. The marriage equality movement and gay marriage, since we view them from our distorted understanding of human sexuality as not being primarily about sex and power, domination, and dependency, we can now begin to understand marriage very differently. Marriage equality reveals a possibility for reinterpreting marriage in a way that brings blessings and benefits to every couple. Now the values of mutuality and partnership and commitment and love are front and center. Because our culture does not recognize the reality of same-sex sexuality, their imagination is limited in understanding what a true marriage can really be about. So often in my debates with colleagues, or even just debates with people who are trying to understand marriage equality, the first question they always want to ask when two men are being wed or two women are being wed, well, if it's two men who are being wed, what's the first question they ask? Well, which one's the wife? Or which one's the husband? Going back, trying to understand in those old frameworks of domination and power and authority. And in engaging that debate is what helped me to realize that suddenly those questions are now off the table. And new ways of relating to one another come to the fore and become much more primary in our relationships, and that, I believe, will be helpful and good for all our marriages. Until we can deal with human sexuality in a forthright and mature way, we cannot begin to reimagine marriage in a way that will allow couples to experience the highest aspiration of our vows. We have to stop looking at marriage as a harness on the energy of human sexuality and view marriage as the context of relationship in which we can explore, understand, experience, and enjoy our sexuality. And men are going to have to learn to behave. And women, well, I'll let a woman preach on that. Our society is going to have to take the bartering of sex out of our interpersonal, political, and economic relationships.